Hello, and welcome to the panel, where we take a look at graphic novels and talk about their story, art, and everything in between. On this episode, on the heels of the WandaVision finale, we're taking a look at a story with everyone's favorite synthezoid, Vision. It's a tale about life, death, family, and what it means to be human. So sit down with your artificial family, reanimate your neighbor's dead dog, and settle in for a tale that's part Norman Rockwell and part Frankenstein. Because today, we're going to take on 2015's The Vision from Marvel Comics. And joining me today, we have Johnny Rose, producer of Previews World Weekly, airing Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Hello.
And from Frank at Home on the Farm and Weird Work, please welcome comic writer Jordan Thomas.
Hey, Mia.
Hey, everyone. How's it going?
Hello. And I think we actually have our fourth guest now just trying to join us. He's just a spinning bar. So Josh, hopefully you can join us momentarily. Josh Mendez, one of our Guatemalan comic book reader fans. So Josh, we hope to see you soon.
All right. So while we're waiting on him to come on in, we're going to be talking about the 12-issue arc, The Vision. It's written by Tom King and with art by Gabriel Hernandez Walta. This Vision story arc ran from November 2015 to October 2016. The Vision wants to be human, and what's more human than family? So the synthezoid decides to build himself one. Meet Virginia, Vin, and Viv. They're the perfect nuclear family, and they share Vision's greatest ambition, or perhaps obsession, the unrelenting desire to be ordinary. They're the family next door, and they have the power to kill us all. So, what could go wrong, right?
A lot could go wrong, as we saw in this series run.
So, what's everyone's quick take before we get into the details? What did you guys think of the overall story of The Vision?
Well, I think I read it for the first time about 3 years ago, and I remember I read it out in my back garden all in one go, couldn't put it down, and rereading it again for this, I still think it's a fantastic series, and it was my introduction to Tom King, who obviously has gone on to do Batman and Batcat and Mr. Miracle, but yeah, I still think this is one of his best series.
I love this series. When we were talking about what book we were going to talk about next, this got thrown out because WandaVision just did finish up. So we wanted to do something in the realm of Wanda and Vision. This book got thrown out, and I love this story because when I got back into comics after a long hiatus of not reading them, this was one of the comics that I constantly heard people talk about in different comic shops that I would go to. Everyone's like, have you picked up The Vision from 2015? This is really, really good. And after reading it, I was not disappointed. So I'm excited to really get a deeper dive into the book.
So for me, I'm not a huge superhero comic person. I know some, but the Avengers and this kind of Marvel world is not something that I'm familiar with. So going into this, I was kind of worried that I wouldn't really be able to catch on to the Vision storyline, but it works really well as a one-off. I didn't have to do too much research into other characters that were mentioned because it is a little bit different from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I honestly definitely recommend this for people, even if you're not too familiar with the Avengers world. It's easy to catch on and gives you a different look at Vision.
And actually, Mia, we have our fourth guest, Josh, joining us. There he is. Here he is.
Hi, Josh.
Welcome.
I'm so excited to be here. Sorry for the delay. You must understand that in my country, the internet connection it's been having a hard time right now with the pandemic, but we were able to make it.
Yay, we're glad you're here.
So Josh, we were just... Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mia.
Oh, so we were just giving our initial thoughts on what you thought about The Vision as a whole, kind of as a comic. What did you think?
Oh my God, it was very exciting. I mean, I have never seen anything in the past 10 years related to this type of comic. I've been collecting comics for almost 36 years, and it really took me by a shock. I'll be honest, when I read it the first time, I was like, hmm, this wasn't like what I was expecting. I thought it was something better or different. But then on the second read, that's how I noticed how broad the scope and also how deep Tom King went with the characters and how much he was able to get away with.
Very true.
Yeah,
All right.
some of the panels in there are just were a lot bloodier than I expected a Marvel comic to be. Like this, the one shot here where Virginia is attacking the Grim Reaper. Like, oh, that's not what I expected from a Marvel comic. But okay, all right, I see where you guys are going. All right, this is a good, litmus test of what to expect from the rest of the book because that was like in the first issue. So I'm like, all right, we're in for a hell of a ride.
And that we are, especially with getting into the story. So, before we get too far into discussing things, because there's so much to deep dive into, let's go ahead and start focusing on the story. So, a little background for anyone that's not familiar with Tom King. Tom King is not only an Eisner winning comic writer, he's also an ex CIA officer who joined after 9/11 and worked in counterterrorism for 7 years before returning to comics with his debut superhero novel, A Once Crowded Sky. Since then, he's worked on titles like Grayson, The Omega Man for Vertigo, and Batman, but also wrote a highly acclaimed miniseries, The Sheriff of Babylon, which was inspired by his time in the CIA. Kind of important to note because of the setting of the Vision, is he currently lives in DC.
You're saying that Tom King currently lives in DC or the
Mhm.
Vision? Oh, I did not know that.
Well, and then the setting of this is Arlington, Virginia, which is right outside of DC. And so I remember him mentioning I-66, and I was like, oh, how does he know about I-66? And that's the way that everyone takes to get into DC. And so
It's
it makes sense.
it's always kind of weird when you read something that is kind of based in the general area that you're in. It's like, oh, I know that.
All right. So getting into the story, what did you think of the story? Let's go ahead and start with Jordan.
Yeah, no, like I said at the beginning, I really love this story. And I think for me, as someone who really enjoys horror a lot as well, it's really interesting how King and Walter kind of combined horror into a Marvel superhero story. Like there's a very unsettling vibe the whole time. It's very atmospheric. He does a lot of what Stephen King does in his writing, a lot of foreshadowing where you get moments where it's like 2 weeks later, their house would be burnt down by one of the visions, or a week later, Viv would be dead, or something like this. Like, so you're constantly on edge and feeling a bit anxious about the story, which I just think is a really interesting way to do a story like this. And like Josh was saying, it's very different to what you would normally expect from a Marvel comic, really. And when you read it all in one go, you can really see how very clearly plotted out everything must have been. Like all of the objects that they decorate their house with, the different gifts from members of the Avengers, all have a very important part to play by the time you get to the end, which is really beautiful writing, I think.
Yeah, what about you, Josh? Did you kind of see some of those same elements, or what did you think of the story?
Yes, something that was very attractive to me on the second reading. It's like I'm also a movie buff. I like a lot of movies, so I remember always when I see a movie the first time, sometimes it doesn't create that impact, and then the second time you start realizing about those little details. And I read recently something that does apply for Vision. I think that a great movie is something that it's different on the second, third, fourth, and fifth viewing. And Vision definitely has that. Some of the things that caught my eye that were not at the beginning, as you mentioned, the atmospheric mood that he has, and also how they apply the color, which is not an element that you normally see in a regular Marvel or DC or Image comics. Um, but how they apply the coloring of the surroundings where they live, how the story begins in autumn, in the fall, and you see the trees that are red and oranges, the sky is yellow, and then as the story progresses, it becomes a little bit more colder, and then it transitions till the end of the story with the yellow, which might be symbolizing a little bit more of hope with how the story ends, right?
Hmm.
I hadn't noticed that. That's actually really interesting. Now I'm going to have to go back and reread it all over again to catch that.
Well, Geordie Belair is one of the best colorists in comics, so anytime you see her name on a book, you know it's going to be pretty great stuff and it's going to affect the storytelling. She's not someone that just sticks down the colors. There's a lot of thought that goes into everything with her work.
Hmm.
And this is something that intrigues me. I would like to talk to Tom and also the colorist, because at some point, whenever you see that panel where Virginia, the kids go to school, Vision goes to work, and if you see me dropping down, it's because I have my copy of Vision here, right? So there is this panel where Virginia is just sitting alone in the living room with a window on the back of her, and then you see that she's surrounded by all this darkness and all this blackness, and the only source of light is the window, and like she's turning away from the light, right? Like she's making that conscious decision that she doesn't know what to do. She hasn't matured yet as much as Vision, and she's just facing that dark ahead of herself. I'm not sure if I'm just thinking into that too much, right? But that's what I got away from it.
No, I mean, it makes perfect sense. One of the things I loved about this story is the fact that it's not, I guess, what I would typically think of a Marvel story, in the fact that there is technically no big bad in this series. There's no Thanos, there's no King in Black, there's no Carnage, like whoever. Like the big bad is kind of like trying to fit in, or just trying to attempt to become a part of normal society, and like what kind of sacrifices you have to make. You know, how much do you lose of yourself as a person in trying to become what this perfect ideal family is. So I love it. It's definitely a distant, it's not, I don't know about distant, but I'd say it's definitely a good break from the type of Marvel stories that I'm used to reading. There may be more out there, and I haven't read too much to really have a fully educated opinion about this, but I think it was a great welcome break from the typical big bad, villain trying to take over the world type storyline.
Yeah.
If I can piggyback on what you just mentioned about the villain, something that also got my attention on this second reading, it's fantastic, man. Really, like Tom King really make the most out of the organic history that the whole family has, right? Like, because if you notice something, also there is a pattern. Like, if you see it in levels, right? Like on the first level, Hank Pym, which is the creator, he starts as a hero. But on the second level, his son, which is Ultron, is a villain. And then on the third level, Vision, which is his son, is a hero. And then on the fourth level, Vision's wife, which is Virginia, ends up as a villain. So you can see like these levels, like poor Virginia was doomed to be a villain, since anything that Vision might have created could have been turned out evil. And the first thing that he created, of course, was Virginia. So you can see like these levels there that Tom was playing on it super organically on the story, on the history of these characters.
It was really well done.
Wow.
I agree with you. And I kept wondering throughout the course of this, as I was reading it, like Vision created this family. So how did he base their brainwaves or their code on that? Like part of it made me feel like when Vision was kind of constructing Virginia, he based her a little bit on Wanda.
Mhm.
Oh, well, they
Yeah.
say that, don't they, in the story, that
Okay,
she gives him her brain patterns the same way that he has Simon Williams, Wonder Man's brain patterns.
Mm-hmm.
She gave them to him because she was dating Wonder Man at the time, and she wanted him to find the same kind of happiness. So, yeah, I guess if you think about, like, say something like Hitchcock's Vertigo, where it's about a replacement kind of bride after the person has lost the previous love of their life, that probably adds an extra psychological problem where you know that your brainwaves are based on the former love of your husband. That's going to definitely cause a few kind of awkward dinner conversations and things, I imagine.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense there. Yes.
Like even amidst all this, I still love the elements of humor that there are in this. Like the one scene where Virginia is trying to seduce Vision, This made me laugh out loud, and the fact that it actually gives Vision a stutter, saying, "I also had a meeting with Iron Man. We spoke about." He couldn't even like look at her and like get like a word out edgewise. And the fact that like as she phases and the lingerie just falls off of her, I thought was like absolutely hysterical, but really cleverly done.
I think that's a part of the great choice of artists as well. I know we're going to get onto the art in a bit, but the fact that it's not such a traditional comic book artist, maybe like your Jim Lee, who's amazing at doing these huge kind of action scenes, but Walter brings a lot of emotion to it. So you see a lot of emotion in the characters' faces. And I think that's like how bits like that work really well, because you can kind of read it in the expressions, even though they're robots or synthezoids. It's like a really important combining of the right artist for the right story. Like, I don't think it would work the same with a super traditional like superhero artist on the book.
Yeah, because I think you really need that emotionality to be seen, because this book is so much about emotions and human emotions, whether it's by the Vision and his family or by the humans in the book. The idea of humans kind of being a little bit of the bad guy, because when I think it's Vin is asked if he's normal in school. Like that to me was just, that it hurt, because it's like that's what every kid kind of goes through, and he thinks that he's not normal, and he thinks that he's not human, but in actuality he's going through the same kind of things that kids go through growing up, and it just makes him human, which I think was one of the most powerful aspects of the story to me, is this thriving to be human, when in fact they are probably more human than the humans that are just offering them cookies because that's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I guess it's taking the whole idea of the want to fit in is like one of the most human desires. So yeah, like you say, that despite them not being human, that almost heightens their humanness in terms of what they're experiencing in the stories. It's like the most extreme version of that. I don't fit in, new school, new friends. Are people going to like me? Am I different to everybody else? It's like that taken to 11.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned that, it's very funny because you're totally right. And the most impressive thing is like Vision's family is trying so hard to become human, and they don't realize that in the struggle of finding that humanness in them, they are already doing human stuff. Like you see being super obsessed about fitting in and about poetry, and then Viv also about liking a guy, and they are still confused, like, am I going on the right path or am I not? And when you mention about Vision stuttering, the wife also does it when she starts to become more human, when she starts to feel guilt, and when she starts to cope up with all of these emotions. That's the funny thing. Like, we as observers, we are able to see that clearly as but they as characters are still struggling, trying to fit in, trying to find that human part in themselves when they are already doing it.
Yeah, and I love also the when Vin is reading Shakespeare, I think it was like The Merchant of Venice, and he's quoting the line, if you prick us, do we not bleed? So that definitely appeals to. I feel like there's also some racial undertones that could go along with this as well, but just trying to showing that they are trying to, they're just people, they're artificial people, but they're still people in their eyes. But I think that it took me a while to really understand what he was saying with the Merchant of Venice quote, but then when he started saying, if you prick us, do we not bleed, then it kind of like really started to sink in for me.
Yeah, there's big parallels between the Merchant of Venice and this story, I think. Like, yeah, it's definitely not an accident that King's chosen to use that play as a kind of a link throughout the issues.
All right. Now, I know we've already started talking about the art a little bit, so is there anything else anyone wanted to speak about before we move on to the art? About the story?
I would like to add something else that I also caught my eye on this second viewing. If you check every single one of the issues, like the 12 issues, at least one page has like the superhero trope that they may have to struggle with. Check it out. Like every comic has that. Okay, if somebody doesn't like the way that the story is going, here's a small taste about the super heroic stuff going on, so that you can continue. And if that's your thing, the superhero trope, it has it. Like, it has those elements between every single one of the comics, and that's cool, right? Because I think that Tom King is going into a deeper story, but at the same time, he's just giving us these pieces about like the regular superhero stories that you read every month.
I want to touch on that real quick also, because he brings up a really good point. This kind of in a way reminded me of Watchmen, because again, it's based in superheroes, but that's not the main draw of it. Like he said, there are superhero tropes and everything going on. Like later on, towards the end of the run, Vision ends up fighting everyone. By the way, we're going to get into this. We're going to get into spoilers, by the way, because we're talking about the entire book. So if you haven't read it, turn away now. But towards the end of the book, when Vision is going to kill Victor, and all the Avengers and pretty much half the Marvel universe is showing up to stop him, it still has the superhero elements. But again, that's not the main part of the story. Much like Watchmen, there are superhero elements, but I feel like the superhero part of it isn't paramount to the story. It's not the main aspect of the story.
Right, yeah, I think especially in the issue where you get the history of Vision and Scarlet Witch, it's like a really nice, the life that goes on around these huge events. So obviously it's during the Kovac saga or Ultron attacking again, and they're kind of stealing these little emotional human moments in between all this kind of chaos and superheroing. So I quite like that kind of between the panels of stories that are kind of legendary being scattered throughout the issues.
Now, Mia, before we move on to the art, I actually want to address some of the comments that we have coming in here. So Rachel Cummings is saying, I ended up here on accident, but I like Marvel a bit more. Thanks to you all. She is also asking, where is this available? You can find the Vision story arc, hopefully at your friendly local comic shop. It may be kind of hard to find because of the success of WandaVision. I feel like a lot of these books are currently in high demand. So if you don't have it, just keep asking your friendly local comic shop, and then they're going to try and get it for you. Troy is saying, ooh, Shakespeare, this is a real book club. And Peter Miller is saying, greetings from fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, USA.
Oh, the heat. All of the heat. All right. Well, let us go ahead and start moving on to our next topic of this, and that is to cover the art. So for the art, we have Gabriel Hernandez Walta, who is an immensely talented artist from Spain, who's also worked on a number of Marvel titles, particularly X-Men. But he's also drawn for a few volumes of IDW's The Veil and Zombies versus Robots. All right. Now, I know we've kind of touched on the art a little bit. I know, Josh, you already kind of got us started. Let's go ahead and get started with you. What did you think in general of the art, and kind of what did you think about it supporting the story?
Oh my God, these guys were working in such a synchrony. As you mentioned, I believe that it's kind of like the same sync that Alan Moore had with Dave Gibbons. Jordan Belair, again, is an amazing colorist. And yes, I have only read before like those issues that Donny Cates did for Doctor Strange. And I think that he was just serving the story. I think they were okay. Of course, Gabriel is an amazing artist, but like in Vision, he really took it to the next level. I mean, like, he was able to express so many emotions, and he was able to suppress so many emotions that, of course, an android will not be able to express as they did. He was able to adapt to the art throughout the entire 11 issues, because if I'm not mistaken, um, the one for just the history of Scarlet Witch and Vision, it was another artist. I don't remember his name, but Gabriel did an amazing work. Like, if he could convey drama, horror, suspense, and then of course the action sequences on issue number 12.
So for the episode you're talking about for the flashback one, that was issue number 7. The penciler was Michael Walsh.
Michael Walsh.
Yes.
Kind of like a pulp vibe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, I like what you said there about the fact that he's got like this style that he has to work with in terms of the vision and being a robot, and how do you show emotion in a robot versus showing emotion in a human, and how that's got to be kind of maybe a different element to the art there, in kind of showing emotion but in a robotic sense, I guess. I didn't think about it that way.
Yes, like whenever they say like great actors, they are not like the method actors. They are not about screaming or expressing too much. But again, at the most important moment, being able to suppress that emotion so that you can understand what is going on through their heads. I think that Gabriel did a lot of work on that, because sometimes you're just interpreting what they're thinking, what they're seeing, how they're feeling. I mean, the expression of the dog here when he gets electrocuted. Oh my God, that image chased my mind a couple of days.
Also, I feel like the way that he's drawing Vision, it's really strange and surreal to also see him interact with the settings around him. Like this scene right here when he's deconstructing the dog and trying to reanimate it. It's not something I ever would have thought Vision would do, but his blank stare and seeing the gory scenario around him is just, it's haunting, and it's really, really well done. So even to me, his point saying about how it's kind of difficult to show emotion with the Vision because he is an android or synthezoid. I think that they do a really good job just showing it by the surroundings that he's in and his interaction with his family.
Yes. I wanted to mention, like in issue number 1, this panel remind me of I think it's Danish director from the 40s, Carl Theodor Dreyer, and he used to ask to the production designer like a lot of things that will emulate a kitchen in the set that they were going to do, right? And this guy bring 30 things, and he will take out 27 and just kept the 3 that scream kitchen. So I think that Gabriel did the same thing whenever they are showing this specific panel on the kitchen when they are all alone. And you can see that this kitchen, they don't have anything on the tables. Like there is nothing on that kitchen. Like there are no forks, no dirty dishes. Like this empty, they could have just moved on that same day or the day afterwards. The house will still be there because these robots, they don't need the things that we humans do. And therefore the mess and the disorder is not there. Like the order of the house, it's in contrast of the chaos that is going on inside of them.
Can we have Josh on every show? Because I'm loving everything that he's saying. He's bringing about so many things I hadn't even thought about. I love this.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that they really hammer that moment home when they drop the oil into the trash can. I don't know if you remember that part, but it's like an empty trash can because they're like faking living in this house, you know, like you were mentioning, it's all just for show. Like when they go to the restaurant and order food and say, we don't actually want you to bring it to us, just bring us a bill in 45 minutes, because it's like they are just play acting at what they think human life is like when they don't really need any of these things.
And it's super funny because the more normal they try to act, the more weird.
Yeah.
Like even the everyday scenarios when Virginia's trying to call Vision at work and she's just saying, I'm sorry, I'm just fighting Giganto at the moment. I like it so well done. And again, just like touching back on what we said earlier about, you know, the superhero tropes being thrown in there, but it just is like a back element to what's going on.
Yeah, they're just so human for being inhuman. They really are, especially that conversation. It was like, yeah, hold on, honey, I'm fighting here. Let me go take the kid to the doctor's appointment.
One thing I also got to cover on is like not necessarily the artist of the issues himself, but like the cover artist Mike DeMondo did such a great job. And this is why
my favorite one, actually, number 3. The one.
Yeah, well, this is why when we were talking about like how at the beginning of the show it's a little bit Norman Rockwell. I feel like part of that comes greatly because of his cover art. I mean, each of these front cover art for the books is just showing, you know, the quote unquote average, everyday, normal family, but they're obviously not, because you see here, you know, Viv has a paper airplane that has like phased right through her head. Vision being arrested and his phasing in through the police car. But I feel like even Mike DeMondo just with the cover art just did an absolutely beautiful job on those.
Yeah, I think the whole team that they put together for this book are just absolutely operating at the top level. Like I mentioned earlier, like Geordie Belair, I don't think you can talk about the art without talking about the amazing colors that really bring forward the kind of horror aspects and put a lot of feeling into the art. But then even the lettering, I think it's Clayton Cowles, is it? The letter on the book? Like even the lettering's great. Like they have their own, like the synthezoids have their own kind of caption boxes and ways of speaking that give it that slightly cold robotic tone compared to when the other people are speaking. And it really is like a team completely working together to deliver on the story.
How about you, Mia? What did you think of the art?
I loved it. I mean, it really grabbed me. It was one of those ones where I kind of went into this and I was like, okay, kind of typical Marvel. And then it was that first scene where Viv is getting impaled, and I was like, oh, okay. Like you said, like, okay, this is where we're going with this. And it gave like a whole different feel. There was like Jordan was saying, this horror aspect to it as you're seeing what Virginia's doing and murdering people, and it's just kind of this brutalness that I was not expecting out of a Marvel comic. I mean, I know that they are inherently violent, but I wasn't expecting that level. And I find it interesting what Josh was saying about the colors that were used, and also Jordan was hinting at it, the colors that were used, and how that also reflects and gives the certain feelings throughout the whole series, actually. So I just think it was beautifully well thought out throughout the whole series.
I just want to say also that it must not be fun to be a table in the Vision's household because in issue 5, like when Virginia's like everything is normal, she smashes the table, and then later on when Viv finds out that her mom killed, I think Chris Kinski, he said it was cool, my mother killed him, and yet another table gets smashed. So, and also let me find. There was one more thing regarding the table. When Vision says the table is broken, and Virginia's like, I do not know how to fix. You know, she's starting that mental breakdown. You know, it's just reflecting, you know, all the stuff there she's like going through internally. She wants to try and become the perfect wife that Vision has made her out to be, but all these other outside forces are kind of working against her, and she just doesn't know how to fix this because she's just not really programmed that way.
And I just think as well, the choice with the eyes is really interesting, like because they've just got these blank white eyes the whole time. It's really like that image, and like the blood is like horror blood instead of like superhero type kind of blood coloring, and it gives it a real kind of David Lynch creepy kind of the creepy underside of normality feel to like the whole thing.
You got ahead of me, man. On the second time, I really wanted when I started reading the Vision, I had to stop and I had to watch Blue Velvet. I have never seen that before, and I started looking at it. And something that really loved about Blue Velvet is how I forgot the character's name, when he found the ear with the ants, and then the other part when they are when he starts seeing that darkness creeping in. I was thinking about like they should have done something on Vision. Like I'm not looking at all these clues that the darkness is creeping in, but then suddenly I remember about this cover, and then you see like these the Russian dolls. Whenever they you take out each of the members of the family, and then inside of them you see death. Oh my God, that was the Lynch moment that I was looking for in this story.
Now, did anyone else have any like prime artistic moments that really stood out for them?
Go ahead, Jordan.
I was just going to say that I really enjoyed the kind of the framing in a lot of the shots. I don't know if you've got any of them, but like when the two kids are arriving at school for the first time and they're kind of coming down out of the sky, that's a real like superhero, everyone looking up in awe of the moment. And when the mum is going to visit the guy who's blackmailing her, it's like only the bottoms of her feet kind of dropping into shot, which is a real horror kind of, oh no, the evil thing is arriving at the door kind of image as well, which I guess kind of foreshadows that something bad is going to happen in the house. And again, it's just very different to other superhero comics. The kind of angle choices and the way they cut off a lot of the bodies, and it's quite tight on the faces and showing kind of body parts. I think we saw earlier as well when the emotional moment where they take each other's hands, Vision and his wife, and to show kind of the bond between them, and with the kind of sex scene as well. Like, it's all very tight in, kind of cinematic, as opposed to maybe a normal Avengers comic where they want to pull right out and show you as much as possible and be like, look, I can draw 25 buildings being destroyed as 70 different superheroes kind of fight. It kind of symbolizes the much more internal feeling of the story. Like, it's much more about what's going on inside of people than pulling back and trying to show you the scope, I guess.
Mhm.
Very
true.
I also like the flashback. I like the coloring for these scenes, like the oranges and reds. It's definitely a different color choice than one might see in a flashback scene. Because when I think of like a flashback scene in comics, you might see a lot of like muted grays or just dulled down colors. Everything here is like so bright and vibrant, and I really like the color choice for these flashback scenes.
They are beautiful. They are amazing. And if you notice that those flashbacks are not being only used whenever Virginia is telling her story in the last issue, but also when she's telling the story about how Grim Reaper attacked her on number 2, when she's telling the story to Vision, and also all of the multiple times that Vision has saved the world. I mean, that's just amazing. Instead of going, I remember Kosh, the story for Batman. They used to do that with flashbacks, but Jim Lee used watercolor style.
I think he uses like biro a bit. Like, there's like 3 different types of flashback in that, aren't there? There's pencil ones, biro ones, watercolor, to kind of separate the different time periods.
And all of them are amazing. You see how he's tying up that parallel story besides the regular story that we're reading. I mean, that was an amazing a stroke of genius how they do it only with the colors. For the part, I have to divide it in 2. Like, my favorite cover will have to be number 10. I mean, that was amazing. I love those genealogical trees where you can see how everybody's there interacting, like the whole family that Hank Pym created. I think that maybe they could have included Wallace and Jocasta, but that will have cramped too much the cover. But it was an amazing cover. I
think that's the cover for the collection as well, right? For the hardback collection, that's the cover. I think that's what I've got at home. They chose that one.
Yes, that's the one. It's beautiful. I think it was a no-brainer. It was between that and the 4 Scarlet Witch going through the chest of Vision, pulling out his heart in that symbolic way. I mean, that was amazing as well. But like the family tree for me is better. For Gabriel art, my favorite panel is where in issue number 8, when Vision and Victorious are going to the gallery art, and they are looking at the picture from Roy Lichtenstein, and Vision asks, "Do you ever wonder, Victor?" For me, I mean, like, that picture of Donald Duck fishing himself, it's the illusion of Vision. Like, he got himself caught into what he was desiring. Like, he wasn't able to cope with that. Mickey Mouse was just laughing at him, like, oh, he got trapped into his own hook. And then Victorious might have been symbolic of that, like, dude, you're trapped in this thing. Avengers just sent me, and I'm watching you. So this picture is a reflection of the comic. And that's what I love. I have always, since I was very young, I consider comics art. I mean, these are not disposable things. And I think that this panel is going to go down in history as one of those things that will elevate the comics to new levels of art in the future generations.
Well said. Well said.
You guys have been so profound. I love these takes on it. And I'm just
Well,
like,
Josh has been profound. Like, I'm kind of stumbling my way through this, but
well, Josh and Jordan have had great takes, and then the only thing I'm pointing out is I love the the mailbox. I feel like it's one of those little things that they didn't have to necessarily include, but it was one of those little touches where it's like, even just walking up to the house, you know that they're not normal. They want to be normal, but then you just look at their mailbox and you're like, all right, it's floating. This is not a normal human family. So just this reiteration throughout the whole comic and just their front door of the fact that they aren't a normal family no matter how much they try.
I love that their
Um,
address is 616, which is another name for the Marvel universe.
Yes.
I thought that was a great touch too.
Touch, yes. I mean, I think that Tom King did it on purpose, right? Like this is rooted in the regular canon history. I mean, this is not going to be some alternate story. I love that.
all right. So now that we've covered the story and we've covered the art, let's go ahead and hear what everyone's final thoughts are. All right, so here's where we get our final thoughts from our guests. Give us a little idea of your final thoughts, especially towards someone who has never read this and wants to pick it up. What would you say to them? Let's go ahead and start with Jordan.
Yeah, I think this is actually a really great series to give to someone who hasn't read a lot of comics, if you want to kind of get them into it, especially if they're like a horror fan, or like we were saying about like David Lynch, or directors kind of that slightly more alternative kind of ilk. And it's completely contained, which is great as well for giving to someone, so that they don't have to worry about lots of tie-in issues or anything. And yeah, I think I would probably still have it as my favorite Tom King series that he's put out.
All right. What about you, Johnny?
I like I said before at the top of the show, like this is one of the comics that I heard passed, between from nerd to nerd's ears as I was going from comic shop to comic shop, just talking about how good this was, and so that's why I picked it up. And I'm still blown away by this. I reread it for this episode, and I still absolutely love this comic. Just all the art is amazing. The story is just absolutely incredible. If you're not a fan, of outright superhero stories, this is still a good story. It's not just about superheroes. Like we said at the beginning of the show, it's about family. It's about what it means to be human. It's about finding your place in the world. It's just all around a great novel. Or a great graphic novel. I can't recommend this enough. If you're able to pick it up, like I said, because of the success of the, with everything with going on with WandaVision, a lot of people are going out there trying to find Wanda Maximoff and Vision storylines. So if you can't find it, keep trying. But yeah, if you're able to, definitely pick this one up. It's a great read.
All right. What about you, Josh?
Well, for me, this is something that I really love. I have always considered. I'm not a DC or a Marvel Comics fan, right? That's like saying, I don't know. I love comics, right? But I have noticed that DC has like those stories that do belong in the pantheon of great comics, on superhero comics. For example, Watchmen, Swamp Thing, Kingdom Come, Omega Men by Tom King as well. So Marvel has had a very tough time finding a title that can fight against them. The only one that I can think of is maybe Old Man Logan, for the reconstruction of the superhero trope, and also Inhumans by Jay Lee and Paul Jenkins. But definitely, Vision is up there with those. I think that Vision can give a run for its money in terms of being a masterpiece of comic books. The only sad part is that not all of the great things that he did were included into the regular continuity, but of course, that's how it is, right? In the industry, it's a great story about people, not robots. It's about a great story about taking decisions, taking good decisions, taking bad decisions. It's a great story about family, about hope at the end of the day, even though through it's a very dark and horror story, it has a lot of hope with the relationship that was strengthened between Vision and his daughter, and how they're even to regain the dog, which is always important, right? To have
Yeah.
to come along with you. I think that this is one of those very special situations where they put the entire team and everybody was working towards a goal, which was to make a great story, and they were able. The powers that be were allow them to do it, and they hit it all in all the right bases. I mean, it's a fantastic, fantastic story. Sad part is that you will not find those many, but I think that it's great that it exists because it can level up the rest of the stories that people are doing on a day-to-day basis on comic books.
Now, I know you just said that nothing can compare, but do you have any suggestions on what someone might want to look into if they kind of found this interesting? What else they might want to read?
You know what? Funny that you say that. Susan Newberry-Hubin said, "If I can't find Vision, what is another book that you recommend for someone who is interested in the same types of themes?" So, good transition.
There we
All right.
go.
Inhumans by Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee. I mean, that one is amazing. It's such an underrated title. Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison. Again, I think it goes into the same vibes. I may gain a lot of haters for this comment that I'm going to make, but for me, the best story of all time for Batman is Arkham Asylum, and in second place is Killing Joke. Very close, very close. But I mean, Arkham Asylum has the same level of symbolism that this story has. A lot of artwork, great story. Omega Man is another amazing thing, like the horrors of war and what people is committed to and to achieve their goals to stop or to win a war is also something that I will recommend if you like Vision or if you cannot
Probably
find.
for Tom King fans, Josh, Mr. Miracle would be a pretty obvious next place to go to. I think Tom, after doing Vision at Marvel, kind of went over to DC and started writing Batman, but he also did another series that's very not similar necessarily. It has quite a lot of similarities in terms of the story, but it's another 12-issue limited series called Mr. Miracle, which is about the New Gods characters. You got Mr. Miracle, and he's married to Big Barda, and they're like having arguments whilst fighting all these kind of demon dark side monsters about redecorating their house, and they've just had a baby, so they're trying to like fight as superheroes whilst being kept up all night by the new baby, and they're kind of hipstery, so they've always got like salad plates whenever like whoever comes around to visit them, one of the other Orion or something from the New Gods turns up. So I'd say if you like Vision, definitely the Mr. Miracle series by Tom King and Mitch Gerads. And if you're looking for more Vision or Vision and Scarlet Witch stuff after the series, there's a run in West Coast Avengers, which is around the 40s, early 50s, which you get flashbacks of in the issue that kind of goes through all their history. I guess in general, that issue is pretty good, just if you want to kind of see the different storylines to go and pick out about Vision and Scarlet Witch. But that's the bit of comics where they've got the two children and Vision comes back as the White Vision. That's a pretty classic kind of Vision and Scarlet Witch story.
I was just doing also, if you can allow me one more minute for something I was thinking about, and it's a very underrated series, are the Sam and Twitch stories written by Brian Michael Bendis. We were reading at the end of the 90s. Those are amazing, as well as if you like that kind of horror and body horror stories. Any of the 5 trade paperbacks written by Warren Ellis, those are amazing. He really knocked it out of the park. Such an underrated series, and right around these days, like before we didn't have YouTube or the social media for these guys. Otherwise, they will be compared on the same level as a lot of great writers that we have, and such an underrated stories.
Those are good suggestions. Really good suggestions. What about you, Johnny? What do you got?
I was just going to like say everything that, look online, look anything that you can find that says Vision. Like I was just looking online. I haven't read too much. Like I said, I wasn't too familiar with Vision before I read this run. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find here it is. So I just looked it up online, and it did like the best Vision storylines to get to know the character. There's an article by Ranker.com. It lists a whole bunch of stuff. Behold the Vision, which is from Avengers number 57. It lists these 2 books, like A Little Worse Than a Man and Little Better Than a Beast, as some of the best stuff on here to read. West Coast Avengers number 45, I think that he was saying, New Vision, Ultimate Vision. I would just go online. Like I know that after WandaVision, after reading this again, I do want to read more about Vision and Wanda. So I know that House of M is a big storyline that everyone talks about. So that's going to be actually next on my reading list. But just do a Google search. I think Josh and Jordan actually have better input than I have. So I'm going to defer to their expertise.
Yeah, the only one I was gonna actually mention was Runaways, and only because Victor is in that, and Runaways was one of my like comics that I got into, but I guess apparently did not get far enough into, but I recognized the name, and then when I put that together, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, now I gotta get back into Runaways and continue that on. So that would be one where characters kind of combine. So this is your reminder. Oh wait.
I
Do we
will
have
give
another
one
comment?
final recommendation. If you can, please go dive into the dollar boxes, quarter beans, or 50 cents. Look for Avengers 348. Oh my God, the best Vision story of all time. I don't want to spoil it for you guys. Just trust me on this one, all right?
Avengers
Yeah, everyone's writing this
348.
down.
Got it. Okay, done.
All right. So I hope everyone has gotten their great recommendations written down, and this is your reminder to pick up the Vision at your local comic shop. And if you don't know where that is, you can head on over to comicshoplocator.com, and you can find your local comic shop next to you, and go ahead and pick up your copies of so many different comics to read, which I'm very excited about. Now, before we head on out of here, let's go ahead and get some plugs in. Starting with Jordan, what do you have that's coming up?
So currently my series Frank at Home on the Farm, which I wrote and it has amazing art by Clark Bin, is coming out through Scout Comics. And to be honest, if you like the Vision, you'd probably like this. It's a very David Lynch style, The Shining on a farm, kind of weird but in normality type of feel. It's about a guy who comes home from World War I to his family farm, expecting them all to be waiting there with open arms for him, but they've all disappeared and he can't find out where they've gone. No one in the village knows what's happened to them. And so he's just left on this farm with these weird animals kind of following him around and watching him all the time as he kind of slowly gets overwhelmed with nightmares and paranoia. And then I also have a Kickstarter going currently called, that's the next issue coming out is number 3. That'll be out later this month.
That looks very scary. That looks very George Orwell 1984.
Yeah, it's definitely like a messed up 1984, maybe like 1984 directed.
No, I'm sorry, not
David Lynch or something.
Not 84.
Not yeah, sorry, Animal Farm.
Animal Farm. Wrong one. You know what I mean.
I just went with you there. Yeah. Animal Farm. Yeah, David Lynch's Animal Farm kind of vibe. So that comes out number 3 at the end of the month, but you can still grab issues 1 and 2 from your local comic book store. And also I currently have a Kickstarter live with art by legendary British artist Shaky Kane, which is, I'm calling it psychedelic noir. It's like LA Confidential set in the world of Futurama. And yeah, you just search weird work on Kickstarter and you can find that there. That's issue number 1. So that's a great one to kind of get started on.
Oh my God, take my money, man. Sounds great.
Shining on a farm, sold. And where can people find you online?
I am Jordan_J_Thomas on Twitter, and I'm ampersand1988 on Instagram, which is a Why the Last Man reference for any Brian K. Vaughan fans.
Oh, how excited are you for the Why the Last Man series?
I'm a huge fan of Why the Last Man. It's one of my absolute favorites, and they've been talking about making it into a series for ages. And I also absolutely love Lock and Key, and that series was okay, but kind of amped up the Riverdale and kind of toned down the more like awful horrorness of that comic. So yeah, it's the thing when you're like super passionate about comics and you have these series that you've loved for years and years and years, it can be more kind of nerve-wracking than exciting sometimes when they're making these adaptions. But fingers crossed, it's great.
I'm right there with you. I'm looking forward to Why the Last Man. I think it's like an FX on Hulu or something. It's supposed to be coming out, but fingers crossed, it's going to be good.
Yep, fingers crossed. All right, and Josh, do you have anything that you're working on, or is there any place that people can find you? Anything you want to promote?
Actually, right now, just people, if they want to chat about comics, they can follow me on Instagram, Josh Loves Comics. On Facebook, Josue Mendez. I'll be there. We can always talk about comics. And then I'm writing an essay on how right now Jonathan Hickman is writing the best Legion of Superheroes story of all time. Sadly, it's at Marvel, right? But a lot of things there that are so amazing, so amazing. And if ever you can always reach me out, I'm always open up for comments here. I love comics, and really, it's something that is part of my life.
No, I think you've got a new co-host, Mia.
Yeah.
I think Mia-
Yeah, we're gonna have you on way more often because this is you've got great commentary. All right, and Johnny, what have you got coming up?
I have a lot going on. I was telling you, like, before the show started, I've got so many plates going on right now. like doing a bunch of video content right now. Free Comic Book Day announcements are coming up. Let me just share the screen here, actually, because I had this ready to go. There it is. Free Comic Book Day is around the corner. It's the greatest day of the year for people in the comic book world. It is. The announcements are coming out the next week, starting March 15th. There's all kinds of announcements in terms of what the gold titles are that are going to be announced, the silver titles, the commemorative artwork. Just stay tuned to the Free Comic Book Day website, the Twitter, the Facebook, like all the social media. So just keep an eye out because there are a whole bunch of announcements coming out. I'm also working hard on stuff behind the scenes for Diamond Select Toys. Every week we are streaming Previews World Weekly every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern at Previews World, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And I think that's it. I don't know. I have to check my calendar.
Johnny is just perpetually busy forever.
And if I had hair, I'd be pulling it out.
Now, if you have a graphic novel that you'd like for us to talk about, leave a comment below and your choice could be picked for future episodes. And remember to follow us at previewsworld.com on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And before we go, we'd like to thank the sponsor of this episode, Mainframe Comic-Con, the first and still the best live streaming fan event. Visit mainframecomiccon.com for daily nerd news, celebrity fan events, and original shows designed for you, the fan. Mainframe Comic-Con, your entertainment and news headquarters. And that's all the time we've got for today. So just wanted to say goodbye and tell you that heroes are a dime a dozen, but comic fans are priceless. We'll see you next time.
Can I give you a high five real quick?
Hey,
let's do a virtual high five here.
Hold on.
I know it's backwards.
Yours. Ready? I
Yes.
feel weird with that. In any event, I had written a script for a Mallrats sequel a couple years.
Well, actually, it's funny because actually, training for this scene was more fun than shooting it. Only because it was just one of those things where what could go wrong did go wrong.
But in any event, I tried to write a Mallrats sequel years ago called Mallrats 2: Die Hard in a Mall.